They called her one of the most beautiful women of the silent screen era. But Corinne Griffith's stint as an actor was only the beginning of a life full of glamour, husbands, and wealth. As it turned out, there was also another side to Corinne Griffith. She also had a life full of lies. Some of these lies were purely for profit, some of them were for fun, and others were just completely weird. But one lie in particular had the whole world shocked, but we'll touch more on this later. At her birth in Texarkana, Texas in 1894, Corinne Griffith was actually Corinne Griffin. Her father was two things, a church minister and a train conductor. Other reports have him as the mayor of Texarkana. He was also 2 full decades older than Griffith's mother, who was just 20 years old. Even though Griffith was born in Texarkana, she later insisted her birthplace was in nearby Waco. Griffith had a younger sister, and mom and dad soon shipped off the two girls to boarding school. Life went on without disturbance until 1912, when a tragic phone call came to the girls at school. Their father had suddenly passed away. Griffith soon got over losing her dad and entered and won a Mardi Gras beauty pageant in New Orleans. Little did Griffith know, there was someone in the audience that had the ability to make a great change in Griffith's life. The man was Rollin S. Sturgeon, and he approached Griffith right after the pageant ended. Sturgeon stunned Griffith by telling her that she had a future in show business. Griffith was more than a little interested and followed Sturgeon back to Hollywood. It simply sounds like every young woman's dream. Sturgeon offered her a contract with Vitagraph right then and there. The studio paid her $15 a week, and here was when she changed her name from Griffin to Griffith. No one really knew why she made the change. But her first roles for Vitagraph were in short films. For Griffith, there was still a burning question though. Would these small roles lead to anything big in the film industry? In 1920, Griffith got her big break. She didn't just get a role in Vitagraph's next feature film, she got two. Her part in the Broadway bubble was playing a character, Adrienne Landreth, and her twin sister as well. It was a role of a lifetime for her, and Griffith didn't hold back at all. Later though, critics called it the crowning achievement of her career. As we'll soon see though, playing her own sister would be a warm-up for Griffith's wacky and mysterious life off screen as well. Around the same time the Broadway bubble came out, Griffith had a romance going on. She met and married Webster Campbell, who was also in the show business. Campbell was a screenwriter, actor, and producer, so the match between the two had a potential to be heavenly for Griffith's career as well as her personal life. Instead of being heavenly though, it was quite the opposite. 3 years into their marriage, Griffith made a disturbing realization. Her marriage had been a huge mistake, and her career was simply going nowhere. Her husband had a problem with booze, and even more tragically, he was harmful to Griffith. So she didn't waste a single moment and gave him the old heave-ho. While she was at it, Griffith looked at her lousy contract with Vitagraph and decided to cut that one up as well. She knew she was worth more than what they were paying her, and she set out to find a studio that would pay her the wage that matched her star power. So Griffith said goodbye to her husband and Vitagraph, and hello to a much better situation at First National Pictures. This was quite a huge step up, as the studio agreed to pay her $2,500 a week. Now, however, she still had to prove to the studio that she was worth such an enormous fee. Her first film with First National Pictures was Black Oxen, and the stakes to prove herself could not have been higher. In Black Oxen, Griffith played a dual role, well, of sorts. The film was simply an instant hit, which solidified Griffith's popularity in Hollywood. Griffiths followed Black Oxen with a string of hit films, including 1924 Love's life's wilderness. While making hit films and solidifying her career in Hollywood, Griffith also had time for romance. She followed her divorce with a new husband who sounds a lot like the old one. In 1924, she married Walter Marosco, a producer, writer, director, and actor. We can only hope he didn't have these same destructive traits as her previous husband. Griffith was fiercely independent, and she wanted to make sure she could take care of herself. When the money did start to roll in from her films, she did something extremely smart. She invested it. Griffith chose real estate as her way to increase her fortune, and it was simply a very smart move. By 1920, she'd amassed a whopping $500,000 in various properties. Griffith made 3 back-to-back hits for First National Pictures, and in 1928 decided she had enough with the studio, so she took a giant risk. She formed Corinne Griffith's Productions with her current husband. Griffith was ready to show the studios that she could do both her job and theirs. Her first film was The Garden of Eden. I think it's safe to assume Griffith was beside herself with worry. She burnt her bridges with studios. While critics gave The Garden of Eden an enthusiastic thumbs up, audiences didn't quite agree, and generally stayed away from it. Griffith hated appearing in box office flops, and this was way worse because she now was the producer. She floundered for a bit, looking for the next direction for her career. This was when she made a surprising choice. She went back to First National Pictures. It seemed like such a huge step backwards for Griffith's career, and it was, however, anything but. In 1929, Griffiths appeared in The Divine Lady. The film produced by her husband was a huge hit. The Divine Lady was one of the first films to have more than just a soundtrack. The film came to life with both singing and sound effects. This would be something completely new for audiences. It seemed inevitable that films with spoken dialogue were just around the corner. But Griffith had a legitimate concern. How would her voice sound on film, and would people perceive it well? Before Griffith allowed her voice to be on film, she took some serious precautions. She convinced the studio to make her transition risk-free. In 1929, Griffith got an insurance policy, not on her life, but on her voice. The studio took out the policy for $1 million. There wasn't, however, enough insurance in the world that would protect Griffith from what would happen next. Talkies were making a big splash with the movie going public, and Griffith had no choice but to dive in. Her first talkie was 1930's Lilies of the Field, which was a remake of one of her previous silent films. Of course, audiences were dying to hear what Griffith sounded like. The truth was devastating. The most beautiful actress in the world didn't have the most beautiful voice. When audiences heard Griffith's voice, they were in shock. She didn't sound good at all. This in fact did not do any favors for the film, which ended up being a box office flop. Griffith had been in flops before, but this one was completely different. She got it, that audiences didn't want to hear her voice, but the talkies were here to stay. Her entire career was about to come crumbling down, and there wasn't much she could do about it. Griffith still had a couple of films left in her, but the writing was on the wall. She didn't have a voice for the talkies. In 1934, Griffith finally retired from show business, at the same time divorced her current husband. She was going to face the end of her career very much alone, so what was her plan? The first part of Griffith's plan was to marry someone rich. Enter George Preston Marshall. Well, Marshall simply owned the Washington Redskins, now called the Washington Commanders, an NFL team. Griffith saw an opportunity in her husband's business. Why not bring a little show business to the football field? So, in addition to writing the team's song, she also designed the team's uniforms. Next, she got her husband to hire a band consisting of 55 musicians to play before the games, and a swing band to provide music during the games. However, it wasn't quite enough for Griffith. she needed drama. If you came to a Washington Redskins game during this time, you were in for more than just a game. At the halftime, a 93-piece band came out dressed head to toe in Indian dresses. Obviously, this was long before the time of political correctness, and the audiences lapped it up. Additionally, on the field was a huge teepee that periodically erupted in smoke. Once Griffith had transformed her husband's football team, she decided it was time to transform lives. In 1941, Griffith decided that she wanted to be a mother. She and her husband adopted 2 girls, Cynthia and Pamela. Griffith talked about the girls in a Los Angeles Times feature about her life. But afterward, a strange mystery popped up. Yearly after that article, there was no other mention of Cynthia and Pamela in any other press. In fact, reporters didn't even write about them in Griffith's obituaries. It was like the girls just vanished into thin air. Griffith was not one to just live off the wealth of her husband, so even though her plan had been to marry someone rich, she still wanted to be independently wealthy. With the cash she made making films, Griffith continued investing in real estate. Griffith was quickly amassing a fortune, and it was very much independent of her husband's money. And as she started counting her bundles of cash, she noticed something. The government had taken a rather large chunk of change and calling it tax. Griffith saw red at the amount that the government had taken. This caused Griffith to sit down and do the only thing she could, vent her anger and write speeches. Griffith used the speeches she'd written against income tax and started trying to convert Americans to say no to income tax. She was absolutely certain that most of the taxes Americans paid went to corruption within the government. In the end, she gave close to 500 speeches against income tax. Griffith firmly believed that women should not be dependent on men for money. She was very proud of the fortune that she had amassed without any help of a man. She said that women would get more respect from their husbands if they had their own money. Griffith really hated the tricks wives had to play in order to get cash they needed and wanted. She certainly was a woman ahead of her time. So in the end, Griffith had a lot to say, and she needed a way to get her message out to Americans. Once Griffith found success in Hollywood, both as an actress and through real estate, she turned her attention to something else. Writing. Griffith wrote 11 books, 2 of which became bestsellers. So it can be said that Griffith's career was flourishing. By 1958, Griffith was having trouble with husband number 3. Griffith suddenly had oodles of time on her hands, and it sent her to a very familiar place. For some reason, Griffith came out of retirement and made a film in 1962. It was Paradise Alley, and it was not at all related to Sylvester Stallone's movie of the same name. It did, however, feature more than a few stars from the silent film era, which may have been why Griffith left retirement to appear in it. The film had a very small release and barely made a ripple in Hollywood. While this film didn't have much noise in Hollywood, Griffith's next marriage certainly would. Being one of the richest women in America, Griffith took a page from the rich man's playbook and took a younger lover, Danny Shaw. He was just 44 years old, which was 25 years younger than Griffith. She was certainly living the life. She had a fortune in real estate and a younger man by her side. One thing that Griffith hadn't learned from her male counterparts was that she didn't have to actually marry her young fling. In 1965, Griffith did exactly that, and the results were catastrophic. Griffith soon realized she made a mistake marrying Danny. Some reports say it was only days after the wedding when Griffith realized she wanted out. Her first plan was to get the marriage annulled. Unfortunately, the judge gave Griffith a hard no, so she made a stunning declaration. The marriage didn't count because she and Danny had never been intimate. This didn't sway the judge one bit, and it was going to be a divorce, and it was gonna get messy. While waiting for the divorce trial to begin, the judge told Griffith that she had to pay Danny $200 every month for the alimony. Griffith was experiencing what so many rich men had to go through, paying for their indiscretions. You can imagine how Griffith, who was so strongly against income tax, felt about this alimony. Obviously, she would do anything to make these payments stop. It wasn't until 1966 that the divorce trial began, so Griffith already paid Danny a big chunk of change. She was beside herself with anger, but she had a bizarre plan to get rid of Danny for good. She wasn't going to hire a hitman. It was far too dangerous. Instead, she approached the judge at the divorce court and said these jaw-dropping words: "I am not Corinne Griffith." If it wasn't Corinne Griffith, who was the woman standing in the courtroom? The mysterious woman told the courtroom that she was actually Augusta Griffin. The stunned courtroom wanted to know how this was possible. The woman claiming to be Augusta Griffin told the courtroom that she had replaced her sister when Griffiths had died in 1924. Whoever was in the courtroom, Griffith or Griffin, told the judge something else earth-shattering. She had never married her two previous husbands. When the judge asked Griffith what her age was, she simply said she didn't know. She claimed that she hadn't kept track of her age since she was 13 years old. Besides that, she added her religion, Christian Science, would not let her state her true age. Griffith was one of three things: crazy, trying to confuse the judge, or she was really her sister. The courtroom had descended into mass confusion. The judge had no idea who was standing there making these claims. Was it Corinne Griffith or her sister? The courtroom then heard from two of Griffith's friends. Surely they could clear up this confusion. Once both of them got up on the stand, there was a hush as the ladies prepared to speak. They both disagreed with her and stated that this certainly was Corinne Griffith. In spite of what her friends said, Griffith stood by her story in court. It was only later, when talking to reporters, that she changed it. The weird thing is that the new story was even more unbelievable than the first one. Maybe Griffith realized that she couldn't pass for her much younger sister, so she created another sister, one exactly of her age. Suddenly, Griffith was her twin sister Mary, and a new narrative was hatched. She said it all started in Mexico, and the story was a doozy. Griffith told reporters that Corinne Griffith had been working in Mexico on a film. While on location, Griffith fell ill with a local disease and died. The director of the film, Adolf Zucker, was desperate to finish the film and didn't know what to do. Somehow, Zucker found out that Griffith had a twin sister and contacted her immediately. Mary Griffith had no idea her sister had died, and when she got the call from Zucker telling her the terrible news, Mary was distraught and couldn't stop crying. Only once she stopped crying could she start listening to Zucker's plan. He said that Mary could replace Corinne and no one would know the difference. Mary didn't know what to say. She couldn't replace her sister. She didn't even know how to act. And then Zucker made an offer she found impossible to refuse. Zucker offered Mary Griffin $1 million if she could replace her sister in the movie he was making in Mexico. Mary was still upset from hearing her twin sister's demise, but she started to listen to the reason. It was a lot of money, and it would be what Corinne would have wanted. She told the director she'd come to Mexico and finish the film. The only problem was, once she started the film, she got a taste of being famous. This led to Mary Griffin making a scandalous decision. Mary Griffin decided, after replacing her sister in one film, to take over her sister's life completely. This is what led to her jaw-dropping admission at the divorce proceedings of Corinne Griffith and Danny Shaw. It was a bizarre confession, and it was very likely a bunch of lies. Griffith was doing whatever she could to avoid paying alimony to her disabled ex-husband. The judge, in the end, didn't make Griffith pay alimony, but she was left with Shaw's lawyer fees to pay. Griffith's divorce and strange testimony was actually just the start of the nightmare. In July of 1979, Griffith suffered a stroke. They took her to St. John's Hospital, where she quietly died on July 13th, 1979. It seemed her passing was a little too quiet, as no one seemed to notice. She was a major Hollywood star, an author, and was, at one time, one of the richest women in the world. Given her celebrity status, the 2 weeks it took for the Daily Variety to print the news of her passing seemed excessive. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this stories or stories alike, make sure to show some love by subscribing or liking this video. Stay tuned for some more informative and exciting stories like this one.